Come along for the ride.
Hello, my name is Anna Covert, and this is The Solar Coaster, the wild ride through the solar industry told by the people who are living it every day. And today we're diving into a story that honestly feels like one of those, wait, are we serious right now moments in the solar industry? Because just when everyone thought we had clarity around energy tax credits, we now have a new bill submitted to Congress to restore them. So the question becomes, what actually happened? Why are we here again? And what does this mean for the future of solar? But before we get into that, I want to introduce my co-host. Alex Herrera is the owner of Sun Energy Today, a solar company based in Arizona, working directly with businesses navigating these exact policy shifts in real time. Alex, welcome back.
Thanks, Anna. And yeah, this one is frustrating because if you're in the solar industry, it feels like we just got stability and now we're right back in uncertainty again.
That's exactly how I felt reading this. So, for context, the article talks about a bill being introduced to restore energy tax credits that were either reduced, limited, or put at risk. And the fact that we even need a restoration bill says a lot.
Yeah, it does. Because the tax credit, whether we're talking about residential, commercial, or storage, has been one of the biggest drivers of solar adoption in the US. It's not a small lever. It's the lever.
And we've talked about this before. Policy stability is everything in solar because customers are making long-term decisions. Installers are hiring and scaling teams. Companies are investing millions into infrastructure. And then policy shifts.
Exactly. And what people outside the industry don't always realize is how fast that impacts the market. You change a tax credit and overnight, deals fall apart. Pipelines slow down. Customers hesitate. Sales cycles get longer. It's immediate.
So let's talk about the big question. Why are we even here? Why is there a need to restore tax credits?
Honestly, because energy policy in the US is constantly shifting depending on political priorities. And solar gets caught in the middle of that. You'll have one phase where incentives are strong, growth accelerates, and then another phase where things get pulled back or restructured.
And it creates this cycle of momentum and then hesitation.
Exactly. And from an operator standpoint, that's one of the hardest things to manage because you're trying to build a business in an environment where the rules can change.
Which is wild when you think about it, because we're not talking about a short-term industry. Solar is a 20 to 30-year decision for homeowners.
Right. And customers feel that uncertainty. Even if they don't fully understand the policy details, they feel the hesitation. They'll say things like, should I wait? Is something changing? Am I going to miss out on something better?
And hesitation kills momentum.
Every time. And that's why these tax credits matter so much. They don't just reduce cost, they create confidence.
That's such a good point. It's not just about the financial incentive. It's about creating a stable environment where people feel comfortable making a decision.
Exactly. Because solar already makes sense economically in a lot of cases. The tax credit just accelerates adoption.
So let's talk about this restoration bill specifically. Because to me, it feels like an attempt to correct something that disrupted the market.
That's exactly what it is. It's basically saying, hey, we may have pulled back too much or created too much uncertainty, and now we need to stabilize things again.
Which raises another question. Why does this keep happening?
Because energy policy is reactive. It's constantly responding to economic conditions, political priorities, grid challenges, technology changes. So instead of having a long-term consistent strategy, we get adjustments.
And those adjustments ripple through the entire industry.
Exactly. And it's not just installers, it's manufacturers, financing companies, investors, utilities. Everyone is impacted.
Let's talk about the customer side again for a second, because I think that's where this gets really real. What are you seeing on the ground when policy uncertainty like this happens?
The biggest thing is hesitation. People pause. They don't necessarily say no, but they stop moving forward. And in solar, timing matters because electricity prices aren't going down.
Right, that's the other side of this. While policy is shifting, utility rates are still increasing.
Exactly. So you've got this weird dynamic where solar still makes sense. Electricity is getting more expensive. But people hesitate because of policy uncertainty.
Which creates friction in the market.
Yeah, and friction slows adoption.
So zooming out, what does this restoration bill signal to you about where the industry is heading?
To me, it signals that solar is too important to ignore. Even if policy shifts temporarily, there's always going to be pressure to support the industry because it ties into energy independence, grid resilience, economic growth, job creation.
So even when things get messy,
They correct.
that's actually a really important takeaway because the solar industry does go through these cycles. But the long-term trend has always been growth.
Exactly. If you zoom out 10 to 20 years, solar has only moved in one direction, up.
And we're now layering in things like AI-driven electricity demand, EV adoption, grid strain.
Which all increase the need for solar.
So in a strange way, even though policy uncertainty creates short-term friction, the long-term demand for solar keeps getting stronger. And that's why, from my perspective, this is more of a temporary disruption than a long-term problem.
But it's still a disruption.
Yeah, and it's one the industry has to navigate carefully because companies that can adapt quickly will win. And companies that rely too heavily on policy will struggle when it changes. So maybe that's the bigger lesson here. Solar can't rely entirely on incentives. It has to stand on its own value.
Exactly. And I think we're already seeing that happen. The economics are getting stronger. Technology is improving. Awareness is growing.
So even as policy evolves,
The foundation is getting stronger.
and that's probably the most important takeaway from this story.
Yeah. Because if solar only worked because of incentives, the industry wouldn't be where it is today.
Exactly. So while this restoration bill is important, it's really just one chapter in a much bigger story.
And that story is still unfolding. As always.
Thanks for listening to Solar Coaster, the wild ride through the solar industry told by the people who are living it every day. My name is Anna Covert.
And I'm Alex Herrera. See you again next week.
I want a solar coaster. Come along for the ride.
This episode of the Solar Coaster is narrated using AI-generated technology, representing Anna Covert and Alex Herrera. The material presented is aggregated from publicly available solar industry news sources. All commentary reflects reported industry developments and does not constitute personal opinions, investment advice, or endorsements by the hosts or
Solar
producers.
Coaster is proudly sponsored by Sun Energy Today, redefining what solar means for business and infrastructure. We engineer and deliver large-scale clean energy solutions, from megawatt solar farms to advanced graphene storage, designed for resilience, performance, and measurable return. Sun Energy Today, built to power what's next. Learn more at sunenergytoday.com.